welcome to the Red Barrels podcast. It's episode 31. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed Megna Giant's last episode. She's not on this one. Maybe she will be in the future. So it's not quite as good as it could be, I'm afraid. But we'll make the best of it. We'll make the best of
Set
it.
the expectations high.
Look forward to your mediocre episode of the Red Barrels podcast, starring me, Alex, and who else?
Me, Sofie. Who else?
Me, Ed. That's it.
That's it. No one
That's
else.
Thanks for listening.
No one else. We're
Sorry.
alone.
See you next week.
Okay, it kind of sounded like we were leading up to the surprise that she was actually going to be in the podcast, but we aren't.
We weren't. We
We
didn't.
weren't. Sorry.
Yeah,
Maybe some
sorry.
other time. But this is the Games One. Welcome to the Games One of the podcast we do, the weekly podcast. It'll be news next week. This week it's games. And first up, for the thrilling conclusion to the saga, it's Sofie.
It's me. Death Stranding Part 3. Welcome back. Yeah. I guess as I have mentioned to my co-hosts, I want to do like a little bit of research into this game, basically. Because I finished it last week. I wasn't playing it on stream. This was a solo adventure for me. I've been sort of craving a solo experience for a while. And it did definitely scratch that itch. It satisfied that itch of like quite an unsocial, although social in, really interesting, unique ways, individual experience. Because I think a lot of the games I play recently have been either sort of like, very social in that I play them on stream. So it's kind of nice to have like a very solitary experience. And I think Death Stranding is like the definition of a very solitary experience. Like you are literally just a guy, walking in the world and then connecting people. I suppose, it is and isn't a quintessentially solitary experience because your job is basically, going around America and then sort of reconnecting all of these cities to make the United Cities of America. I won't sort of rehash the plot every time because I feel like that's going to get a bit tiresome. But, sort of reconnecting everyone into this United Cities of America. And I think for most of the game, you kind of don't really encounter many people physically. A lot of people have compared it to sort of like or said that it's very sort of prescient of 2020 because it came out, I think in 2020 or 2019, I forget. And then obviously it features like a lot of talking to people basically through holograms. You actually interact with people very rarely in person. I mean, even when they're sort of like ultra realistic holograms. And there's this like, I guess, spoiler warning just for this segment because I have finished the game. I basically finished the game. I think the last time I spoke about it, I had like, I think probably about 4 hours left. I thought I only had 2 hours. More on that later.
I will say just before we get into it that I'll put a time stamp for when the Death Stranding spoilers are over in the description of the podcast. So check that out if you want to skip ahead.
Yeah. I guess I mean, it's interesting because towards the end of the game, you sort of, the whole objective is that you're traipsing across, to the west. Yes, to the west of the United States to sort of reconnect all of these sort of disparate cities. And then you sort of fight this big, you don't really fight this. You fight this, you fight Higgs, who has been kind of hunting you down for like, I think my least favorite part of the game was Higgs as a character.
He's not great.
I found him extremely uninteresting as a villain. He clearly is just like, I want to destroy the world because I'm evil. And he's clearly just like, just an insert for this voice actor that Kojima really likes. And I'm like,
It's Troy Baker. It's Troy Baker, the famous Troy Baker.
Yeah, exactly, right? It's just an insert for Troy Baker's all it feels like. For some reason, he licks people all the time, and I'm just like, I'm just not into this. I'm not into the vibe. I don't think he's a very interesting villain because it doesn't really make a lot of sense in terms of, it just doesn't seem to have a motive for doing the things that he does. Yeah, so I don't know. You fight Higgs, and it's actually surprisingly not the sort of final boss battle because then you have to traipse all the way back across to the east, which I initially was like, oh man. And I was like, no, actually, I'm quite grateful to have this opportunity to traipse all the way back. I did take a couple of shortcuts, which I didn't take the first time. But it was kind of nice to actually take like one last journey back and kind of see where you came from. And it feels like to kind of revisit all of your progress and revisit some of the facilities that you visited along the way. I discovered a facility that I hadn't discovered in my way to the west, because I guess it wasn't like one of the main quests, so I happened to find it just in my ventures, which was really cool, actually. That was because I was taking a shortcut, so it was. I think it came up as like an optional quest, which like I will be honest, I'm never much of a completionist when it comes to games, as you can tell. I rarely finish most games that I talk about. But even when I do finish games, I'm not super interested in like ticking all the boxes. It's never been something, that's not really the kind of gamer that I am. So I think probably lots of people would be like, what, you only found the veteran porter like as an accident? I was like, yeah, and I actually think that's cool. I think it's cool that I found him as an accident.
Did you find Jeff Keighley?
Nope, I don't think so. Or I maybe I did. He's
one of the first ones. He's one of the first ones.
Then I must have. I think I must have then. I don't know. Like there's a couple like cameos that I wouldn't have picked up on had I not like occasionally been playing it in a Discord call with my friends who occasionally be like, oh, that's blank. And I'd be like, cool. I don't know who that is.
I'm not gonna lie, I'm a bit disappointed that you weren't immediately alerted to the presence of Jeff Keighley and didn't light up your life. He is he's the patron saint of the podcast.
Listen,
he's who we
my
all follow.
My relationship with Jeff Keighley is my own.
Okay, all right.
It's a very personal, sanctified relationship with Keighley that I have.
Smell one drop of Jeff Keighley in 8 million parts water.
It's a Jeff Keighley shark. He's just like.
Yeah. I take him being the patron saint of the podcast seriously, and clearly my co-hosts might not. They might not.
No, I don't. Again, like I said, my relationship with Jeff is much more personal, much more intimate. Okay. I don't need to go to church. Okay, it's much more personal and intimate. All right.
The Church of Keighley, absolutely.
The Church of Keighley. Okay, you guys go to church all you want. Okay, you sing the songs. I don't need to. I got stuff to do on Sundays, okay? But
he's life, and in the case of Highguard, he was death.
Excellent. Very, very well done.
Very true. Very
true.
So
then you traipse all the way back across the United States again, and then you sort of find out there's this sort of like the sort of twist involving the character who is your sister ostensibly. Turns out like she's the extinction entity, the EE. Which are words that the video game throws around as though you know what these things mean all the time, where they're like, oh my god, an EE, and everyone's like, yeah, an EE, an extension entity, you know what that is. And I'm like,
the phone network?
Sure, yeah, like the phone network. That's my phone network. Hashtag not sponsored. So
I'm sure EE would love to be associated with an extinction entity though, yeah.
I'm sure they would, So yeah, I guess without summarizing the entire plot, I enjoyed it. I really did enjoy it. There felt like lots of layers. As some of you know, I like reading books. That's probably my main media of consumption at the moment. And it feels like there's a lot of layers. It feels like this could do with a reread in terms of looking at the themes and the vibes, because I guess Kojima also is quite an opinionated guy. Again, I don't know as much of it about him as like my colleagues do on the podcast and also listeners do. I also I intended to do a bit more research, like in the form of I just looked up like Death Stranding interpretations, of Death Stranding analysis on YouTube, and I found 2 videos specifically that alluded to specifically socialist interpretations of the game, which I thought was interesting. I also found one Reddit post where someone said it was anarcho-capitalist, and everyone in the comments laughed at him. So,
no, I don't think I don't think
you can really get away with
He's
it.
Barely paid. He's barely paid.
Yeah. Well, he isn't, right? He's paid in likes, right? If anything, I think but I think the game sort of like strongly emphasizes the idea of like voluntarism, voluntarily doing things and just basically doing things for the sake of likes, which is like you could interpret it in terms of like a, social media lens,
currency,
but I think you could, as a currency in terms of social media, but I think you can also, I think the way that it's intended is that it is as meaningful as you want it to be, in that it could also be meaningless. I feel like that's really emphasized by this character Hartman eventually, who it's this whole joke where like Hartman just constantly gives you like 20 likes at a time during cutscenes, like just as a joke. He like looks directly at the camera, breaks the fourth wall, puts his thumbs up, and then that little like sound effect plays, and it's like, hey, and then you get like 20 likes, and it happens like 5 times in one cutscene. And he's also just like a nice guy. So the vibe feels like, yeah, he just gives them out for free because A, he's wealthy, which is funny. Is I guess there's this he's the wealthiest character in the game. So it feels like he has more likes to give because he's A, sort of like in a bit of a cheerier mood despite the horrors of his life.
I don't think it is really a currency because you can just
No,
like
I don't think it is
generate
either,
it
'cause it's for
immediately.
free.
There's no cost to
I
it.
think
Like,
it's implied that he is just generous, right? That he is actually just generous, not even
Yeah.
financially, but like with love and
Oh, I
affection
see.
as well, right? Is he has a lot to give, and I think like it's funny because this likes thing that he just constantly gives out is free. It doesn't mean anything to anyone technically. But, you know, it does kind of like give you a little bit of dopamine when you hear that sound effect. You're like, oh, someone used my road. You know, or someone liked my sign.
I do.
You know, baby's happy with me.
I do think like it feels like, you know, if the likes were currency, they just immediately go into like hyperinflation because I always felt like I always gave the full amount of likes it would let you give to anyone whenever like I used the ladder or
Well,
whatever.
so did
I was
I.
like, but like I
Yeah.
started going like la, 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 like okay, let's go.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I think it'd be pretty worthless
A bit like
as a currency.
rating an Uber driver. Like, there's got to be a good reason if you're going to do anything other than the max.
I will say that Cory Doctorow, who's on the left, I'm not the biggest fan, but he wrote a science fiction novel years ago. It's kind of what he first got known for, in which there was basically a utopian future which has a currency system based essentially on likes. It was called Woffy or something. And he wrote a whole book about it. So I think if you're interested in that as a concept, you could read that book.
That guy never stops writing as well. If that sounds interesting to you, you could probably read a lot of Cory Doctorow. I think he's fine. I read Enshedification most recently. I couldn't enjoy any of his fiction. Enshedification was like, it's pretty good, but he is very millennial. And I say that as a millennial. He's extremely millennial.
He's a fucking Gen Xer to his core. That dude is super fucking Gen X.
Well, he has adopted millennial culture, like elder millennial
elder
culture.
Gen Xer, because I could.
How old
he's
is
like
he?
in his 50s. He's in his
find
50s.
out.
He's in his 50s.
I mean what I said. It comes across as very millennial, where it's like doggos and awesome sauce.
That's true. That is true. That is true. And we were talking about this last episode.
For those listeners, Ed is cringing.
That's tough to take.
2 episodes.
That is tough to take.
Epic,
Yeah.
epic
I can
fails.
have-
I think you'll
I
forget
can has
what
cheeseburger. I can
while
has
these
likes.
things might be associated with like referred to as millennial. There is a core group of kind of elder Gen Xers who really glommed onto that shit. And he's
like
he's
my
one of them.
dad. Well, he's a boomer actually. My dad's a boomer. My dad loves going epic fail,
dear.
and it's
Lamau. Ruffle.
Gets in his ruffle cop,
Actually, my dad does not say ruffle.
The original Lamau.
Anyway.
Let's lock in.
Let's lock in. I don't have that much more to say, basically. I think like I've looked up also as just a cursory before starting this episode on Google Scholar. There's quite a few really interestingly titled articles about Death Stranding. So there's clearly like, I just think there's so much to this game. It does feel like there's a lot of meat. There's a lot of analysis that you could have fun with. Like, I think, you know, I wanted to see how many academic papers existed on the subject because, like, you could write academic papers about the subject. It's like there's a lot of layers of metaphor and meaning here. Is it a little bit convoluted? Absolutely. I'll be honest. The ending, I sent a video to my two co-hosts on the podcast. I sent a video in the group chat of me trying desperately to finish this godforsaken game. Which, again, I liked it, but my God, did the ending overstay its welcome. There's a segment where you can convince a character to basically not do the bad thing that, you know, they think they have to do. And then you're just kind of stuck in, like, on the beach in this sort of purgatory. And you kind of have to, like, walk off to the end of the environment, and then it sort of resets your character. And this happens about, I think, probably 15 times. I think I was probably doing this, like, get up, walk to the edge of the beach, reset, get up, walk to the edge of the beach, reset. I think I probably did it about 15 times. It probably took me about an hour of, like, IRL time. I literally had to bring up a YouTube video on my second monitor. I was like, wow, I know this comes to an end, but I'm so fucking bored. And I think that was a terrible decision. I understand the point. I understand what it's trying to say. I think they could have conveyed it in a million different ways. Even I think I literally would have preferred like a few hours later rather than making me walk off the beach 20,000 times. I just think it overstayed its welcome, and it felt a little bit too up his own ass, if I'm so I feel like that's my main takeaway from Death Stranding, is that like I think Kojima seems like an interesting guy with really interesting ideas, but it seems like with enough time and money, he may be the sort of person who is absolutely inclined to just go so far up his own ass, where it's like maybe it's really interesting inside there, maybe it's not. Time will tell. Will I play the second game? I would like to, actually. Yeah, I think I wouldn't have, I'll be honest, if it hadn't been for, I've seen the cover photo, I've seen the cover picture for Death Stranding 2. And I guess the cover picture for Death Stranding 2 features a toddler on the cover. And then I'm like, ooh, baby. So I'm interested basically just because I'm like, yeah, I really liked BB. I really liked Lou, BB, the character, the little baby tool that turns to baby. I really liked it. I thought that was a really charming relationship. It reminded me a lot of The Mandalorian, and what I really liked about the first season of The Mandalorian in terms of it was originally just a really charming, good TV show about what it means to be a good dad.
I thought you'd never seen any Star Wars, Soph.
Yeah, because The Mandalorian let me down because season 2 is rubbish and everything else is bad.
Very
so The
frustrating.
Mandalorian, it's really good. The season 1 of The Mandalorian is really, really good. And then I guess Pedro Pascal must have negotiated for like more speaking lines or something, and I just feel like it went downhill from there. But anyway, not that I don't like Pedro Pascal, I just think it entirely ruined the sort of essentiality of the character. Anyway, I'm not talking about The Mandalorian. My point is I think that at the end of the day, Death Stranding is like, it has a lot to say about like what it means to be a dad. You know, I think the stakes are quite high, but they're also quite low. They're also, at the end of the day, just sort of about like forging connections on an international scale, but also forging connections on an interpersonal scale from between one person and a bibi, between one person and a family member, and between, you know, twins that then merge into one person. That was weird, but okay. You know, fine. So I think in summation, I think I'm interested to play the second one, mostly because of the cover picture. The one probably would have been enough for me, but I am like, you know what? I'm interested enough. I probably won't play it anytime soon. I'll wait for it to go down in price. But yeah, I liked it. It's good.
I will say that the pacing in Death Stranding 2 is much, much better. It doesn't drag on
I should hope so.
like it does in the first one. I think he took that on board.
This is the thing, I'm not saying Kojima isn't like a cool, smart guy. I'm just saying that maybe sometimes he needs a leash, you know? A long leash, but maybe a leash, you know?
Famously, he wanted to, when he was making, I think, Metal Gear Solid 3, he wanted to make it so that if you died, even like right at the end of the game, it would completely delete your save game. And he had to be like talked back from that.
Kojima, stop. Kojima, no, stop. Kojima, come back. That doesn't surprise me. Yeah.
Well, Sofie, what do you think of, as I'm sure you very clearly remember from me explaining at length on this very podcast, my allegorical theory about Death Stranding, that Amelie, your sister/mother/lover in the game, represents America and Kojima's feelings towards America.
Yeah, I guess so. I guess the main sort of feature of that, I suppose, I think the main sort of point where I thought about that allegory that you drew is basically where Emily sort of implies that kind of like an accelerationist philosophy about America. Like you might as well just sort of get it over with. Like America's clearly going in this direction of like destroying itself, so it might as well be her. So that, yeah, I guess that felt kind of. I think I don't. Maybe I think I can see it. I can see it. I'm not. Yeah, I think
You're not
like
committing
she
to
definitely. I'm not committed to it just because I think it's probably. I feel like my instinct is that it's slightly more complicated than that, just in terms of like her being like a literal family member to Sam. That to me it feels a bit more complex than that. But I think 100% see America in the sort of like, like I said, the accelerationism of it all. And also that terrible red dress.
Red dress. Yeah, you weren't a fan.
Yeah, it changed to black eventually, though, so that was an improvement.
What did you think of history's greatest line of dialogue? You're my Mario and I'm your Princess Peach.
Yeah, I did laugh out loud at that. I did want to bring that up and I forgot. You know, I did laugh out loud at that. I thought It was great. And I think I like the sense of humor that Kojima has.
Mm.
I do like the sort of winks and nods towards the camera. I feel like it's one of very few products these days that can pull that off in a way that isn't like super Marvel-esque, that I find kind of
Yeah.
cringe. Like very, what the fuck is his name? This Marvel superhero played by Canadian guy that everyone loves. Super like self-aware.
Yeah.
Deadpool. Yeah, very like Deadpool self-awareness, which I'm just kind of, I really fucking hate it in video games and TV. I'm like, I want to take you seriously, so
Mm.
take yourself seriously. But I think it really does quite honestly effectively, I think, those little winks and nods, because it takes itself so seriously,
yeah.
like 80% of the time, and then the other 20%, it's like, yeah, little gifs and gaffs. I'm like, yeah, totally fine. I'm on board. Like that you can appreciate the ridiculousness, you know, as much as the seriousness of it is good. I enjoyed
Your
it.
kind of reticence with Kojima before seemed to mainly
I wouldn't say reticent. I would say skeptical.
but it seemed to be mainly based on you thinking he was a creep. So what did you kind of, having played the whole game, what do you kind of think about his portrayal of women
I
in
don't
the
think
game?
I want. That's the thing. I don't think I thought he was a creep. I think my only exposure to the really unextended conversation about him was one where you mentioned him. There was like a whole plot device in a different game where you had to take pictures of sexy
Yeah.
women or something, and like that was one of my first introductions. So you can kind of
Sure.
understand. Well, it's not that I thought he was a creep, but I was like, well, that kind of.
Sure. But like,
I think his portrayal of women is pretty good. I don't super enjoy that. Like, I feel like, yeah, I don't know. It's like, I don't know. I don't really love the emphasis on pregnancy, but that could just be a me problem because I think I'm a little bit like, I forget what the word is, but I think I'm a little bit pregnancy phobic. The whole like idea of birth and pregnancy is just really uncomfortable for me. I don't like it. But like from, you know, so I was like, I thought the emphasis on pregnancy and like, you know, human life and women producing human life, I was like, I don't know how I feel about it in terms of, I wasn't sure how well it would sort of pass the Bechdel test.
Yeah. It probably doesn't. I suspect it doesn't.
Oh, I'm thinking, I was thinking, like, one of the things of the Bechdel test is, like, women don't just talk about men, and they don't, generally, I think. Especially, I think my favorite character were, I guess, the twins, essentially, though I did like them a lot. I thought that plotline was really interesting, and I thought they were also really well performed. I didn't particularly enjoy Amelie's character, and I didn't really particularly feel any strong feelings about Fragile. Yeah, I feel like there was sort of one feminist gripe that I had about the worst thing that could possibly happen to Fragile is that her body is no longer a young woman's. Really emphasizing like the value of youth and beauty in women, which I've felt a bit icky about. But yeah, I think they were fine. They probably absolutely could have been better written. I think male characters were better written than female characters, but I do think the twins were like quite interestingly written. That being said, I also think that was also maybe a little bit of a stereotype on twins as well, of being like they're like spiritually connected and like psychic and stuff, which I'm like is a bit cliche, but it feels like maybe that's just his kind of thing.
Yeah. I mean, I think I think it's his
borders on cliche.
Kojima, I think his heart regarding women is in the right place, but he's he's obviously pretty horny sometimes, but even outside of that, he kind of like has a somewhat kind of patronizing, oh my God, women, they're like the life giver. Aren't they incredible?
Yeah, that is kind of the vibe that I
They're
got.
like,
aren't they capable of like magic? And I'm like, I don't need you to think women are magical. I need you to think women are people. So, and I feel like at times it's like, I think you're more into the women are magical than the women are people angle, Kojima, but it doesn't feel like you're actively hurting. You know, it's like, it feels very benign.
I do. It's worth saying though that like
which I'm
the Death Stranding games are like, I mean, there are some pretty egregious stuff in the Metal Gear games. Even though in those they're very kind of earnest, you know, it feels like he's just kind of like, but I just like a pretty lady. Just let me put a pretty lady in the game.
I just like pretty girls. I love women.
Can I have a pretty girl just this once?
Just this once. Just this one time. Come on. Yeah. But overall, I guess Death Stranding, my impression of Kojima is that he seems kind of just benign. Like, I think he is probably a little bit creepy about women, but it seems like a benign kind of creepy, which is rare. and definitely not something people should strive for.
I would just say one last thing is like, what do you think of Mads Mikkelsen in the game? Because I have to say, back when I played it in 2019 when it came out, I remember that actually the Game Awards happened while I was playing it, and Mads Mikkelsen won the best performance, whatever. And I remember thinking, he just got it because he's the most famous. Come on, he's all right.
Yeah, he's not in it
But then,
that much.
I played the end of the game, and I was kind of blown away by how good he was at the end.
He's fantastic. He is fantastic at the end. Well, listen, I have a soft spot for Mads Mikkelsen. I really like him. I actually rewatched, based on my soft spot for him, in Death Stranding as well. I rewatched a movie called Another Round, which is a Danish movie in which he stars.
Well, you talked about this last time, I'll say.
Yeah, I said this, previous podcast. He just like is always cast as a villain in Western media, but in Danish media, he's just like a sweet guy. And like it was really nice to see him kind of take that role in Death Stranding. And he's like very much the, you think he's a bad guy. It turns out he was also just trying to be a good dad, No, so I liked it a lot. I think it was a fantastic performance. I think a lot of the performances were incredible. I think also one of the performances from, I forget the guy with the Dead Man. No, not Dead Man. Die Hardman. Die Hardman as well. His performance was also, he was so fucking lackluster until the end and got to deliver this really hardcore monologue. And I was like, holy shit. Like they really went to town with these performances. And I read that they are going to make a movie out of it. I'm entirely unsurprised. And it's like, I hope most of these actors do reprise the roles because they were all fantastic. It was really, really good. So yeah, it was just a nice experience. Definitely more of a film than a video game.
That's Kojima,
definitely
baby.
like a heavy rain. Yeah, a question in there. Did this need to be a video game? Maybe. And that's it. that's my
We did
take.
it. We did it. Yeah. Okay. Well, I think we'll probably move on then to me.
You.
Yes, I have been playing the game everyone's talking about. People are saying it might be Game of the Year. That's right. I have been playing Resident Evil 7.
Really?
Resident Evil 7.
Oh.
Yeah, the one that came out in 2017. All right, sorry. I'm sorry we're not
That's
relevant.
not the number I was expecting.
Sorry. Are people saying Resident Evil 7 is going to be Game of the Year? Because I feel like you've just completely tricked us there, Alex.
Yeah, I think you just
sorry.
lied, actually.
I'm sorry,
that wasn't
everyone.
like
that
wasn't like a bait and
clever.
switch. That was just a lie.
Everyone's really up about Final Fantasy 9. Not Final Fantasy, Resident Evil 9, and I've not played it. I want to play it, and I will play it soonish, but I haven't played 7, and I haven't played 8. So I got through 7, and I will probably play 8 soon. And then after that,
good man,
we'll work out 9. Yes, Ed loves it when me and everyone plays everything in perfect order. I have to say, I still haven't played Resident Evil 1. I did play the remake of 2. I haven't played 3. I haven't played 5. I never played 4. I haven't played 6.
Why have you bothered with 7 and 8?
Well, whatever. This is the new, just to give people a bit of a recap of exactly what happened here. So, as I say, Resident Evil started on the original PlayStation, a bunch of games there, very beloved games, specifically about zombies. Then they moved into the next generation with 4, and they kind of ditched the zombies. They kind of, the enemies are fairly zombie-esque. They're not wildly different from zombies, but they're not technically zombies. And they kind of moved into, branching out into more different types of horror. 4 was very kind of action-focused. I was a big fan of 4. I really liked it. And then they had 5, which came out and was controversial in a number of ways. Maybe we'll talk about that one day. 6, which was, by all accounts, kind of a disaster. It was like this huge, bloated game that no one liked. And so, at this point, Resident Evil was kind of fallow. There'd been a few other, side games, Resident Evil Revelations games, but they didn't hardly set the world alight. So, when this got announced, it was shown off, and people really weren't sure what it was. And when, at the end of the trailer, it said Resident Evil 7, people were kind of blown away that this is what Resident Evil was now. And that's because another game came out in the meantime, a little game, speaking of Kojima, called PT. That's right, the playable trailer, that's what that stood for the game that never came out, Silent Hills, made by Kojima, but then the whole thing collapsed and he left the company and he went off and made Death Stranding. But PT, this little demo, was incredibly influential generally on horror games. Had this liminal space horror where you're just in a little corridor and it's just doing stuff with that. And it also very clearly meant that some guy at Capcom, just stomped down to wherever the office they were making the next Resident Evil at, burst through the door and said, now we're doing this now. Because this game is very much like PT. It is the actual subtitle of it is it's called Resident Evil 7 Biohazard. It's called that because in Japan the series has always been called Biohazard, and in Japan this was called Resident Evil 7 Biohazard 7 Resident Evil as a way to kind of combine them or something, although they just went back to Resident Evil and Biohazard afterwards. But
Very
the
confusing.
point is that they were going back to it being residential again, i.e., you're in a house like the original Resident Evil on the PlayStation. And yeah, it really leads into this liminal spaces. It's a lot of walking around corridors in the house. So yeah, there's a lot of corridors, and it's all, at least the first part of the game, and which I'll get to, is all just in this house. It starts off. It's basically it's they when they started the game, they were like, we basing this game on PT, and we're basing it off of season 1 of True Detective because it's in especially the final episode of season 1 of True Detective because it's in Louisiana. It's you're a guy called Ethan who hears from his wife who's been missing for 3 years that she sends him a video message and asks him to come to this random house. So he does it. And when he gets there, not only does he discover her and she's weird and crazy and attacking you and you have to fend her off, but then you get knocked out and you find yourself strapped to a dinner table with a crazy, weird family of like Southern people, and they're all kind of monsters. They're psychopaths. And as the game goes on, they aren't at least fully human anymore either. There's all sorts of weird shit going on, and you get free, and basically you now have to escape the house and maybe see if you can bring your wife home with you. That's basically the setup of the game. And early on, it's kind of fantastic. Basically, it sets up basically you have to deal with one of the family members at a time. But like from the very beginning, you're just in this house, and there is just this guy in the house with you, and he's just kind of wandering around, and it's genuinely quite like affecting when you just turn a corner and he's just there at the end of the corridor, and he kind of just like turns around to look at you, and you're like shit, and you fuck off the other way around. Because suffice to say, if he catches you, he's going to kill you. And like yeah, just this kind of really basic setup. I mean, I've talked about this on the podcast that I'm not really affected by horror games or even horror media in general. And I've got to say, I wasn't really that scared by this game. This game has got a reputation for being incredibly scary, the scariest Resident Evil. And I'm not saying this to, plump myself up. I know that both my co-hosts and the listeners at home all see me as an incredibly masculine, stoic man who can resist any kind of fear in his life. That is not truly the case. I am a sensitive soul, but I just find it difficult to kind of identify with horror when it's when it's supernatural on any real level, or just feels unrealistic, or like just a situation I'm distant from. I'm never going to be chased down by zombies or a monster or ghosts or whatever, right? But I can imagine being in a house with some weird guy who wants to get me. I can imagine it. I can put myself in that situation. It's something that could, unfortunately, potentially happen to me in real life, right? So I have to say, I was like, seeing this guy at the end of the corridor, I was like, fuck, and turned around the corner. And so that really did kind of get me. And so just a very kind of normal, mundane setting. I mean, the house is like dilapidated. It's like all crumbling, and it's, as is quite relevant, it's quite moldy. So it's not 100% just completely normal, which is kind of what PT was. PT just looked like a normal house corridor in that. But in this one, just the feeling that this guy is just wandering around. He could be around any corner. You have to try and get into some room to get some item to open a lock somewhere or pick up some healing items or whatever. And he could come in at any time. You're not sure where he is. It's like genuinely, it is quite affecting. And that's quite a lot of the game. And, it's really commendable. And I have to say, it's a game, let's say it came out in 2017. It's on the PlayStation, from the PlayStation 4. It looks as really good. I bought it ages ago in some sale, and I never got around to playing it on my PlayStation. But I played it at the start, and I played it for about an hour until I realized that actually I was playing the PlayStation 4 version, and it's a separate download to get the PS5 version. But like, I didn't even really realize that. In fact, I thought, well, this looks really nice for a game I assumed was the PS5 version of it. But when I got the PS5 version and it has like ray tracing and stuff, I was like, wow, it looks really nice. Less so when you go outside. Basically, inside it looks amazing. Outside it looks significantly worse. But it is a very nice looking game, and the character animation is fantastic. One thing that about this game is that I'd say it came out for the PS4, and it specifically had a PlayStation VR version. Now, I never played that. I kind of wanted to play it, but I used to. I still do somewhere have a PlayStation VR, but it was a really, frankly, not very good, very early VR headset, like very low resolution. You had to like set up all these things to do it, and it always kept desyncing and stuff. So I kind of gave up on it after a while. But I fully intended to be like, oh man, when PSVR 2 comes out, I'll play it on that. And they never put out a version of PSVR 2, so I never bought it. And it's also, they don't even have a proper VR version of it on the PC, which is bizarre. Though apparently there are modders have done it, and it's fantastic through the mod, apparently. So Ed, maybe you want to try that sometime since you're a resident cyberhead.
Yeah.
But
yeah, maybe. That does sound fun in a way that sort of wetting yourself sounds fun, yeah.
Well, I mean, part of it is that, like, you can really tell that they thought about this for VR, kind of maybe VR first even, because there are just a lot of bits where, I mean, one, you're just in this house, you're like looking at little things in it, in the environment, and there are a lot of bits where like some monster comes at you and it like grabs at in your face, kind of a bit like, you know, old 3D movies where they would contrive to have a bit where like a pole goes right into the front of the screen. There are a few bits like that would work well in VR. But so, I mean, I'd probably recommend it. I did hear the VR was great. But even without the VR, there's a lot of physicality in it. And like these characters would come in really close and talk to you and stuff quite often. So yeah, just a really well made. Unfortunately, it's a game that kind of slowly gets worse as the game goes along. At the beginning of the game, it's like amazing. And then I don't think it's ever bad. But essentially, the problem is that when it's just you in this house with this family who are like 4 or 5 people, that's really good. But they clearly felt that just wasn't enough to sustain a whole game. So eventually, at one point, but it does seem like that's what it's going to be for quite a long bit. And then you go into the basement, and in the basement, you find what are called the Molded, who are effectively zombies. They're basically zombies in terms of gameplay terms. Physically, they look like these like big lumbering monsters who are made of black mold, and they're all glistening and stuff. So they're quite unpleasant to look at, as you'd imagine, for a horror game monster.
And they're a biohazard.
And they're a biohazard, yeah. This is the
very, very
This
clever.
is the game, incidentally, that everyone made jokes about when when people thought they saw black mold in the background of J.K. Rowling's webcam videos. So this is very much the black mold game. And there's a lot of mold. Mold is a large part of like the kind of lore and backstory of exactly what's happened here. So all these creatures are called the Molded. And yeah, all that kind of tension of like this feeling like a real thing suddenly just ends. Now you've got these monsters to deal with. You've just got to empty bullets into their heads. In survival horror style, there aren't many bullets, not much ammo. It's ammo limited. I think it's just because they wanted to do the limited ammo thing. They still had to have something you needed to shoot. And the family members, I mean, it's pretty obvious you're not going to be able to do any real damage to them until you're in a boss battle with them. So, you know, they had to have something in between, and this is what they have. And they're not awful or anything, but they definitely just feel less interesting than the family, and they're just more and more of them as the game goes on. Like, eventually, without spoiling anything, you move on from the house. I would say the house is actually quite large. It's like, it turns out there's another old house next to it. There may be, in fact, 3 houses next to each other. So they really push out what the house, quote unquote, could possibly mean as far as it can go. And then you move to a new location, which is a ship. It's a big ship that is rusting away. It's wrecked in the bayou or something. And then you're just fighting these Molded all through it. You get a lot more guns. And it's just a lot less interesting. It's just a lot less interesting, becomes a much more kind of generic game. That really kind of, that spark it had early on kind of fades away. It's still fine. It's still good even by the end of the game, but it just loses that spark. So The beginning, the family stuff, that's really great. But yeah, it doesn't really manage to sustain that. And I don't know, maybe it couldn't. Maybe that setting simply cannot provide enough content for, this big AAA, I think it was like 20 hours long or something game that they wanted to produce. It's a Resident Evil game. It's a numbered Resident Evil game. So I think they just felt like they just had to have more game in it, which I can understand, but
Mm.
it just doesn't work as well. So it's a bit of a disappointment as it goes along. But I would say it's worth playing and finishing even. Just to see like the conclusion of the plot, there's twists, it's worth it for that. But that is a bit of a disappointment. As for the rest of it, the politics of this game, there's not a huge amount. In general, the Resident Evil series, have either of you played any Resident Evil games?
Nope.
I've played 4 and
Ah.
5.
Well, even by that point, this had changed a bit, but from the beginning, they've been about the Umbrella Corporation, in which an evil corporation has been making bioweapons, which in the first games, one of which is a zombie virus that manages to escape the lab and cause havoc. But there's always also been other genetic horrors, like weird guys, like traditionally, and I mean almost always, with giant eyeballs growing out of them, which are the weak points in the boss battles, like classically. And so, yeah, it's an evil corporation that's like throwing caution to the wind to make these terrible bioterrorism weapons, like and monstrosities for the purposes of selling to like arms as an arms manufacturer or something. Exactly what their aims aren't terribly clear. Probably real Resident Evil heads will know all the lore and know exactly what they're about. I've never been one of them, so I don't only have a surface level knowledge of it. But at the end, even by the time of Resident Evil 4, Umbrella had been officially disbanded. So they don't really exist anymore. But like maybe they do sort of exist in some ways. In this, it turns out that everything that happened, all the mold stuff and this family going crazy, is because of essentially a different type of bioweapon. It's made by a different organization who are called The Connections. And they are, I guess, they're kind of implied to be a bit more like explicitly like organized crime. Although what the difference between an organized crime bioweapons manufacturer that and official corporation one is not terribly clear to me. Maybe that's the point they're trying to make. But also, at the end of the game, this is a slight spoiler, but it turns out that Umbrella has now become a PMC, a private military company, specifically in an attempt to like make up for the crimes of Umbrella. They're going to go around and, defeat bioweapons manufacturers or whatever, and to deal with these bioweapons outbreaks, like to try and make up for what they did. They are now at least somewhat a different organization. Not terribly clear. So like that element of it isn't super clear, but in general, Resident Evil in general is about corporations not caring about the people and just like causing untold damage on the environment and the people. And in this case, the family, who are these monstrous psychopaths who are hunting you down, turns out that they were just like normal people. They were perfectly decent, normal people who just got exposed to this bioweapon and it turned them into this terrible thing. And you had to, I don't know. Does this count as a spoiler? You have to kill them over the course of the game. Hardly a surprise. So, like, that's what it's going for. And there is a certain amount of, like, as I said, this family, even though I think technically it would be a stretch to say they are working class in that simply because, I mean, well, maybe in a purely Marxist sense they are, although you don't really hear about what jobs they had before they got turned into monsters. Their house is very large, and they also have another house next to it, and also another older house next to it, and like an extensive basement. It's pretty big. They pretty much have an estate, but it's all kind of, on a room by room level. It's all very, mundane and ordinary. It's not like big banqueting halls or something. So they are kind of presented, even if maybe not technically, as kind of working class, but they're treated as like, the working men and women, the hoi polloi. They are ordinary people who are living their lives and going about their business and doing what they can for their families, who are just like suddenly put upon by this corporation, and it completely rips apart their lives and causes terrible horror for all these other people around them as well. who basically end up being the prey of the weird psychopath family, right? So, that's definitely an element, but I think it's a stretch to say they explore it in any depth. Certainly in this game, I've never seen any real evidence of them exploring in any of the games from what I've seen. But maybe I'm sure someone could come up with something. It's always these games have always, especially when they get into like the wider series lore stuff, kind of heavily leaned on kind of camp and just like absurdly over the top and like complicated family like character dynamics. Like everyone's involved with everyone else. These like various characters. So yeah, I don't think it's a particularly political game, but there is a bit there. But overall, I did enjoy it, even if it declines in quality as it goes on. I would recommend it. Definitely a change from the very action-focused 4 that I played, or even I played the remake of 2 and the remake of 4 as well, and they're very action-focused. This is all first person, which was the first time they'd done that in a series and was like a big departure. That was kind of the main thing that people really latched onto, and it definitely fits that well in this environment. Yeah, a pretty good game. I'm pro Resident Evil 7 : Biohazard.
Would you check back on the older ones?
I did try playing the older ones a while ago, back when the GameCube was around in them olden days. I got Resident Evil. They made a remake of Resident Evil 1, which is a great remake. Like, it's only one generation forward. It has like vastly improved graphics and it has a really great style. There, you can get that like an HD version of that now, and by all accounts, it's very good. But I tried playing it, and this was like this. Okay, this is the game where I'm going to get into Resident Evil, and I simply could not deal with the fixed camera angles and the tank controls, which is how those games worked. They had pre-rendered backgrounds, and so the camera's in one place, and then the character was a real-time 3D character who you'd walk, and like up would always be walking forward regardless of the actual direction that's traveling across
Orientation of the
of
camera.
the screen. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I just could not deal with that. And just things like standing next to a zombie and like trying to press the button to aim up like just at their head is incredibly difficult. And I just got so frustrated. Like, this is not something that should be difficult for this character who's like a trained soldier or something to do, special forces or whatever. To like literally just raise your arms up to fire at the head of a zombie who is right in front of you. And so I just couldn't be doing with it. I really liked the remake of 2 though, when the original 2 was just as I described. So there are rumors they're gonna remake again Resident Evil 1 in proper 3D. Maybe that's not the purists' choice, but I think I probably would enjoy that and I'd probably try it. It seems that Resident Evil 7 was kind of a reset for the whole series, and from there it kind of seems like they're planning to pretty much remake every previous game from that. Good luck with 5, I'll say that. But even the plot, like I haven't played Resident Evil 9, but apparently in Resident Evil 9 there are bits where they have flashbacks to previous games, and the flashbacks are clearly to the remakes of the previous games. So they've kind of been retconned into being the true versions of Resident Evil, and they're kind of just gonna kind of fence off the old fixed camera ones into like as a separate thing. I feel bad as a kind of an old head on video games. I know there's a lot of people who love those games and they feel like it's really lost something from getting away from that. But I can't deny that for me personally, I would much prefer it being proper 3D. All right.
Yes, it doesn't.
Thank you, Alex.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, you're going to say something.
Never mind.
Sofie, go for it.
No, I was just gonna. But I don't remember the main character of Requiem. Who's the main character at 9? What the fuck is his
I
name?
don't know. Well, I mean, it's Leon. Yes, Leon. Yeah.
Leon.
Well, there's 2 main characters apparently:
Yeah.
Grace something and Leon.
Yeah. And Leon isn't in 7.
No. There's a bunch of them. Something that is interesting is that like this game has almost no connection to Resident Evil for most of it. Like as the game goes along and towards the end, it's like, oh, they mention Umbrella, they mention Raccoon City, which is the big city from the original games. They mention it, and then at the very end, I'm not going to spoil it, but there are like very clear connections to Resident Evil. And in fact, there's a bunch of DLC for this game, and one of them is you play a classic Resident Evil character, basically coming in to kind of mop up after everything's gone down. and
Mm.
and some things like that. So there are clear connections to it, but for a lot of the game, it feels like you're just in a weird house with weird monster people. They could have called this something completely different. But I think that was a conscious choice to like branch the series out and do more different things with it. So I think that's fun. But yes, no Leon, unfortunately. You're not going to get his beautiful floppy hair in this one.
And his beautiful
He
arms.
does have big arms.
Everyone loves his
big
arms.
Big arms.
In 9, yeah.
He's got. Something that's interesting about these games is that they are set in the year they come out in. So because Resident Evil 2, which is the first one Leon was in, that came out in the 90s. In the remake, they clearly have kind of based him somewhat on Leonardo DiCaprio back in the 90s. They've given him like very, very 90s hair and stuff. But now he's like 50 or whatever. So he's quite old in that game, in 9.
Well, they made him zaddy.
That's quite interesting.
Yes, they made
him zaddy.
They daddied him.
Yeah, he's very.
This is a new version of the
so.
daddification of games. This is the fetishization of the daddification of games, and I can't complain about it.
I'm on board.
Okay, well, there's something to look forward to when we finally get around to Resident Evil 9. Hopefully, maybe in a few months.
That does put a bit of a hard limit on the game, including those characters, though, doesn't it?
They can always. Oh no!
Resident
I'm
Evil.
a clone.
Resident Evil 15 and Leon's
I'm actually a clone now.
Coming out of retirement
I got injected by the Q virus that makes me immortal and young forever. How could that possibly have happened? I mean, I think they've already pointed out. I mean, I again, I'm not playing 9. I think they kind of use it as a kind of a big celebration for all of Resident Evil in that game, from what I've seen. So I think a lot of characters come back, but I have seen some people mention that at least in other Resident Evil media, like especially the female characters, the women tend to look weirdly young, considering they should be middle-aged by now. But so maybe that's inevitable. I'm sure they can always find ways around. Don't worry. They're never going to get rid of Leon and his floppy hair. I say as if and then like I'm going to play Resident Evil 9 and it's going to die at the end probably. But they can always bring him back. It's Resident Evil. So all right. Well, shall we move on to the final game, which is Ed?
Yes, sirree. My main game that I'll be covering is Assassin's Creed Brotherhood.
Broho. That's what people call it. Assassin's Creed Broho.
Broho.
Okay. I did just want to mention that I have also been playing. I've played the Zero Parades demo that came out. I haven't really got anything to add to it. That I want to specifically say about it, other than that I quite enjoyed it. To be honest, I thought it was it had a lot of similarities to Disco Elysium, but with like some new elements that are quite promising, and it's promised to be like politically engaged, at least. Like how that actually pans out remains to be seen. Part of me was kind of hoping to some extent that there's the Zaun one, because it's kind of like they corporately own it, but they didn't really make it the people that are currently there. I kind of wanted to not like it, so I'm slightly disappointed to report that it was. I did quite like it.
Well, I mean,
sorry everyone.
I would
see.
say I've seen a lot of people hating on it, kind of somewhat sight unseen on the internet, and I'd say that if you love Disco Elysium and you appreciate the ideology in Disco Elysium, you probably should give a game by the UK's first unionized game company a chance. I'd say that. That's my political take. That's to the wider internet weirdos out there.
Yeah, fair enough. That's a more positive way of thinking about it. Yeah. Thank you, Alex. So with that little aside past, let me go on to an equally new and relevant game. As I say, Assassin's Creed Brotherhood, which is I won't be calling it that, which is a 2010 action-adventure game from Ubisoft Montreal. This is the third game in the Assassin's Creed series, and it's also the third one that I've played, because I've played them in order, like a good boy. This game was developed by the same team internally who worked on the first 2 Assassin's Creed games. Meanwhile, a different team from Ubisoft Montreal was working on Assassin's Creed 3, which I think is an interesting relationship to set like what seems to be like the side game, like to give that to the people that made the previous 2, and to set a new team up making the proper sequel. That feels strange to me. I believe there was also another team working on Assassin's Creed Revelations, And then these guys started working on that too. I'm a bit confused by that. I haven't looked into it too much yet, but maybe in the future. So this game came out just 1 year after Assassin's Creed 2, and the game had a turnaround time of 9 months. That's how long it was in development for. And also, partway through the game's development, the creative director of the game, the original one, left. So the question I ask is, can this rushed and rocky development be felt in the game itself? Well, let's talk about it. Yeah, I'm going to talk you through my experience of the game at the start, and then I'll broaden it out a little bit. Because I can't, in good faith, talk about the start of the game without mentioning that I had quite a rough beginning with this game. It took me well over an hour to get this game working properly on the Steam Deck. It kept opening up with no controls working whatsoever. I tried a whole range of different fixes, different proton shells, all this kind of stuff. And ultimately, I'm not even sure what combination of random things I tried from Reddit actually worked, but eventually it did work. But that's just to give you the context that, first of all, it's not ideal to play on Steam Deck. Also, the game requires that you log in to Uplay every time you open it. You have to put your username and password in manually every single time,
Wow.
and that's quite annoying. Yeah, that sucks. So, at least on Steam Deck, that's how it works. So, I will have some less positive things to say at the start of the game and some more positive things later. And I just want to flag up that this could all be an artifact of that to some extent. But from what I've seen online, other people do share some of my thoughts here. So let me talk about the actual game. The vast majority of the game is set in Rome rather than moving from city to city like you do in the previous games. But before you can get to Rome, there's the opening section. You continue on directly from where Assassin's Creed 2 finished off. And then after some story stuff, you can do the first real bit of gameplay, which is set back at the villa area. What I found to be a very strange choice is that the game opens with you needing to do 3 small, not very interesting side quests. That's the first thing that you do in this whole game, is 3 random jobs. One of them is you need to carry flowers for this lady, and then Ezio flirts with her. Another one is you need to wake a man up who is meant to be manning a cannon but has fallen asleep. And the third one is you need to wrangle some horses. And to me, this seems just like such a bizarre choice. Why would you start your cool historical Assassins game with 3 very non-assassin-y side quests that don't in any way relate to what you're going to be doing for the rest of the game? I mean, maybe I was just still in a bad mood from struggling to get the game running, but this really threw me off. And then Ezio has a sex scene, which I kind of want to describe as gratuitous. Yeah, I kind of want to describe as gratuitous, but I can't really put my finger on why I would think that. I guess it's legitimate to have sex scenes in media, so there's no reason why it would be gratuitous. It just felt a bit, again, weird left field start with the side quest, and then suddenly he's having sex, and then suddenly the villa is attacked, and you need to defend the villa using these big cannons. And I also didn't like this sequence very much. I failed multiple times, and I have literally no idea why. And then I passed it, and I didn't do anything differently, and I have no clue what happened. And this isn't a mechanic that you are ever going to need to revisit again. So why are they teaching you it in the opening section? So I think you're getting the impression I had a fairly rough introduction to the game up until this point, which is, I want to say, maybe about an hour in. For context, this is a 15-hour game. So that's not nothing, but it's also not hugely substantial. And it's at this point where things begin to look up a bit. You get this cool sequence of Ezio dodging cannon fire and horseback while the town is torn apart by bombardment all around him. It looks very cool. And then you're introduced to the main villain of the game, Cesare Borgia, the son of the villain from the previous game. He's the one bombarding the town, and as soon as you meet him, he murders your uncle. So you don't like him. He's a prick. You might remember his uncle. His name is Mario from the previous Assassin's Creed game. So you've already got an established relationship. And they do the "it's me, a Mario" joke. So, that's good. Oh, they did that in Assassin's Creed 2. You don't get it again here, I'm afraid. So they do a good job straight off the bat of establishing this Cesare as a guy you need to take seriously. He's ruining the town. He's killed your uncle. And in general, this Cesare guy is very over the top, quite a camp character, quite a moody, whiny character. And I just think that works really well for the game. I think that's very positive. I think the voice actor, Andreas Appiges, maybe, apologies, he does an excellent job with him, and I think it's a lot of fun. And the real life Cesare Borgia was one of the inspirations for Machiavelli's The Prince. And given that Machiavelli is an important secondary character in this game, that all flows together well, and it's quite satisfying that they've done that. So anyway, let me finish off this opening section. Ezio chases Cesare to Rome, and the game can start properly. So that's a bit of a rough first impression, like I say, but let's talk about the gameplay overall in Assassin's Creed Brotherhood, or whatever, Broho, or whatever.
That's right. That's right.
What
that's
are the
right.
main things you do?
Give in to Broho.
What are the main things you do in Assassin's Creed games? I mean, I'd say there's the combat, I'd say there's the parkour, I'd say there's the exploration, there's the story, and then there's like the never-ending array of side and optional things that you can do. So I'll talk about each one of those things as how I'm going to structure the remainder of my section here. So let's start with the combat. I have always found the combat to be a bit sort of too loose in these games. When you're having the base combat experience, I find you sort of swing again and again and again, and it doesn't really feel like it's connecting very viscerally to me. And you sometimes do a kick or a grab, and then you'll do some damage, and it doesn't really feel like there's that much of a link with what I'm doing with how successful I am at it. It's all right. Like conceptually, it's quite similar to the Arkham games, but it's just sort of just a less satisfying version of that, I feel. And you get into these long loops sometimes where you're not doing any damage, and that's just not very fun. But the base combat of this game doesn't actually come up as much as you might think, because there have been two main additions to the combat system in this game versus the previous ones. The first is the execution streaks, which is where you sort of chain kills together. And as long as you keep this sort of chain of kills going, keep your momentum up, you basically can insta-kill anything you come up against. And the second new mechanic is the Brotherhood mechanic, the eponymous Brotherhood mechanic. Across Rome, you can meet and recruit people into the Assassins Brotherhood, hence the title of the game. And then, when in combat, you can summon them to fight alongside you and basically assassinate people for you pretty easily. And I enjoyed that aspect of the game. Recruiting, training up assassins, makes you feel more powerful, makes you feel like a leader. The recruits all have got little names, and I felt sort of a little bit invested in them. And also, Brotherhood is not a gendered term here. You have both male and female assassins, so that's progressive for the time period. And indeed, a side aspect of the plot is Ezio's sister becoming an assassin. So there's an attempt to not be just purely a male-based game, which I do appreciate. But yeah, with those two tweaks to the combat in general has become incredibly easy the vast majority of the time, like trivially easy. Apart from every so often when you fail to do the execution streak thing, or maybe like later in the game that happens a little bit more, you're basically just like plowing through combat, absolutely no problem at all. And to be honest, I liked that. I appreciated that. I didn't play this game to feel challenged. Like this isn't Dark Souls or something. I played it to feel like a cool assassin guy, like going around in a historical setting. So the combat being easy was absolutely fine if you ask me. So yeah, that's my take on the combat. I thought it was an improvement that it was easy. Let's move on to the parkour, because I think that this feels definitely and noticeably better in this game than it did in the previous two. With each game, there are fewer of those moments where you tell your character to do something and then he decides to do something wildly different. Like you tell him to jump in one direction and he jumps in a completely different direction and like turns around and grabs the wall or something. Here, it feels way more fluid than it has done and just more fun. And the thing that the parkour system made me think of was the environmental design in this game is really good. It really facilitates the parkour like relatively naturally. And I was thinking, it's funny how there are so many shooters that all they need from their environmental design is that you have something to take cover behind. And yet they end up making these levels which feel completely out of place and unnatural with very blatant waist-high cover everywhere. And this game requires so much more out of its environmental design. And they somehow made it feel natural and real, like you're actually in 16th century Rome. It's so impressive when you compare the two like that. And I think it's sort of an underappreciated aspect of the game. Like, obviously, it's one of the main parts, but also, we shouldn't let it pass by. Like, it actually is very impressive. The parkour system is great. The environmental design is great. So, shout out to that aspect of the game. I guess while we're talking about traversing, they've increased how important horses are in the game. You can still ride horses in this game, but now they can be ridden in cities too. And also, you can summon them remotely, like in The Witcher. But to be honest, I didn't really ever ride my horse. And I also literally never rode a gondola, which is something I didn't realize you could do until I was watching stuff about the game afterwards. Because the parkour's just so fun. Why would I bother riding on a horse? I can jump off a building. That's way better. I guess I would also want to say that both the parkour and the combat animations I think are really smooth still. They're really well done. I think the presentation overall is quite a large improvement for Assassin's Creed 2. Like, given that it's been like 1 year since it came out, it's like noticeably better looking, and it's really just looks better than you might expect from a 15-year-old game. So it obviously aged, but it does effectively transport you back to Rome in that time period, and the music was pretty good too. So yeah, speaking about Rome, when you get to Rome, it's in a bit of a sorry state, and as we get onto the exploration part of the game that I'm talking about now, you'll discover that lots of shops are in a state of disrepair. The aqueducts are broken as well. And that's because everything's being basically controlled by the Borgias, who have set up a series of towers around the city to exert their control. And as you go through the game, you'll slowly take down these towers one by one to take control of areas of the city yourself. And this is a mechanic that Ubisoft are going to revisit so many times in the future. But this is a good, relatively early instance of them doing that.
This is the first one, I think, where they did that.
I was going to say the first one, and then I chickened out just in case there was... Well, actually, but yeah, no. As far as I'm aware, this is the first one. And once you take control of that area of the city, you can spend money to renovate the shops, the aqueducts, galleries, all this sort of stuff. And then in turn, those will all give you passive income for the rest of the game. On the one hand...
Wait. Are you saying that Ezio's on that grind set?
Hell yeah, brother. He's got that passive income.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like... On the one hand, there's a little bit of capitalist realism going on here, is how I interpret it anyway. Like, it kind of implies that 15th century Rome, a lot of the game is set in, it's sort of on the borderline, but the 15th century Rome basically works like how capitalism works today, where like an investor comes along and puts their money in, and then they're entitled to returns from the investment, and then you take that investment and put it in more shops, and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So, is committing the cardinal sin of capitalism realism, I think, which... for those who aren't familiar with the phrase, like, basically it's kind of creating the sense that capitalism is sort of natural and inevitable, and it's been here for a really, really long time. And that feeling of inevitability is an important and like unconscious aspect of how capitalism reproduces itself. And as with much of what Ezio does in this game, we're not really encouraged to interrogate what this means or think about that politically or ethically or anything like that. That's not where the game's interest lies. We're not meant to think, like, is it reasonable that this nobleman can come along and extract profits like this? Or, we're not meant to question whether extracting money from shops and from brothels is the same thing, or is it okay that he kills so many randos over the course of the game, or is the little empire that he builds up any better than Borgia's? That's not. You could think about any of those things, but the game doesn't. So I'm not gonna, which is fine. Like, you don't owe me thinking about that, but it is a limitation of the game. That's an interesting series of interesting lines of thought they could have interrogated. But there we go. But on the flip side, it's a fun gameplay mechanic. Honestly, like, there's no getting around that, and no one's really being exploited because it's just a video game. So it is satisfying to slowly see your control of the map increase. Areas revitalized by Ezio's very generous capital. Yeah, it's like a little fantasy of capitalism where no one actually gets hurt. So yeah, it is a good addition, and I can see why they're going to deploy it in every game ever made after that. So yeah, let me talk about the story component of the game now. I feel like I've given this quite a glowing review up to this point, and I did like the game a lot, but I do think this story was the one that I've been least engaged with of the three that I've played. I'll give some spoilers for the story here, but nothing too major. But if you want to jump ahead, feel free to. On paper, the story works quite well. We see Ezio's growth from the start of Assassin's Creed 2, where he's basically a certified mess, to by the end of this game, he's not quite a master assassin, but he's like a leader of assassins. And it's quite a compelling character arc to see, and it's done relatively well in terms of just the plot of it. We in terms of other plot points that I feel like on paper work quite well, there are main character deaths that bookend the game. What we talked about, Uncle Mario dies right at the start, and then Lucy, who's a character in the sort of Desmond future part of the game that I've not touched on yet and won't talk about too much at all, to be honest, dies at the end. Although I do understand that the reason why the main character Lucy dies at the end was because the actor, Kirsten Bell, of Good Place and many other things fame, asked for a pay rise, and they decided to kill her instead.
I mean,
so that's not great.
While I don't want to be down on, I don't want to be pro-capital here. Kristen Dunst was...
Sounds like you're about to risk it, Alex.
Kristen Bell became huge, and she was also in Frozen. So probably she asked for a lot of money. Like, I think her price went up significantly over the couple of games, so I can kind of
I'm
understand
not
it.
sure that timeline doesn't add
Yeah,
up
I
though.
don't think that lines up.
Frozen's
Yeah.
Frozen's 2013, and this is
Maybe
2010.
not.
So
Maybe
this
not.
is years
Maybe
before
not. Maybe
Frozen.
not. I remember just thinking, wow.
But anyway.
So I think it was just a woman trying to get the pay that she's entitled to.
She was famous. She was in
Yeah,
But
Alex.
they were
she
like,
was in Victoria Mars. What was it? Not Victoria. Something Mars. What was
yeah.
it?
Well, they hired her for that
Yeah,
reason.
I know. I'm just saying. Like, I
Yeah.
can see why they'd be like, okay, well, this is a bit expensive. That's all. That's all I'm saying.
But yeah,
Look,
but
Kristen Bell,
okay.
get that bag.
Anyway,
Kristen
either
Bell,
way,
get that bag. Nothing against you.
we can talk about it further. Yeah. So that's that can be an effective story moment, plot moment, and as I've already said, we have a great villain. I would say very camp, very fun, very over the top. But despite it kind of working quite well on paper, like as I was actually playing the game, the story just didn't really connect with me. It didn't do much for me. And I have thought a bit about why that would be, and I don't know for sure. But I think it's partially because, well, a lot of the story happens in cutscenes, so I'm not like actually progressing it with what I'm doing that much, I feel like. And the actual missions are often like quite functional and like instrumental. Like, we need to go here and kill this person to have this cause. Like, and it's quite video gamey in that sense. And like the earlier games were also video gamey, but in their structure, but they almost felt so clearly video gamey that I accepted it. Whereas this feels like it's pretending to have a more sophisticated like structure than it actually is. But then fundamentally, it is a bit like, here are the 4 things that need to happen before the story can advance. Now go and do them. And then you go and then you come back and then they'll let you have a little bit more of the story. And then, you need to go trail this guy for a bit or whatever. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'm misidentifying what I didn't like, but it just didn't quite connect. And speaking of the missions themselves have a pretty good variety given the length of the game. There's vehicle missions, trailing missions, assassinations, of course, and a whole bunch of other stuff. I did a couple of I had quite a couple of weird mission experiences that I want to point out. There's one where you have to, it's like a stealth mission in the Colosseum, and you have a point on your minimap where it tells you like where you need to go to trigger the next bit of the mission. And I went to that point, nothing there. So this is a stealth mission, and so I'm like looking around, but I'm trying not to get seen. So I ended up like killing literally every enemy NPC that you can access in the entire Colosseum. I still couldn't find the thing that triggered the next bit. And it turns out I was meant to have climbed up the outside of the Colosseum, not the inside of the Colosseum. And the thing that triggers it is on the outside of the Colosseum in a place that's very, very hard to see. So that was a bit weird. Not great. And then the other one is there's a mission where you're in disguise as a guard carrying a big chest full of valuable stuff, and the other people around you are real guards. And the person you're pretending to be is meant to know where to take the chest. So you're effectively playing a game of hotter or colder, where you're like walking confidently as though you know where you're going. And then like based on how they respond, you have to like go a different direction or keep going in the same direction. And I think that's quite a weird mechanic to put in the game, but I like that. I think it's quite fun that they experimented with these like slightly bizarre mission types, and I appreciate that about the game. I respect it. So yeah, the plot was fine, good even. It just left something to be desired, and I think the ending is part of that as well. That it doesn't feel like there's that much momentum being built by the story, but to the extent that there is, and I guess I would say on that as well. I suppose it's tricky when killing one individual man is like a big thing that you're aiming to do in the game. And your protagonist is obviously such that they could kill basically anyone from the start. So it does sort of feel, I guess, somewhat natural that it would feel a bit like you're doing a series of delaying things in your story to stop you doing the thing that you could probably do now if necessary. But yeah, the ending especially is quite messy. The timeline gets incredibly confusing, like right at the end, like the last like 20 minutes of the game. Like I don't understand what the sequence of events was meant to be. And from what I understand, to actually properly understand that, you need to like read the comics or whatever to like really get what actually happened
some
there.
like multiple
so
years
great.
suddenly pass or something. I can't really remember. It's been a long time.
Yeah, that's right. It jumps forward like 6 years, but then also some of it seems like it's jumping forward, but then it's like a memory from the jumping forward. I don't know. It got really confusing, and I don't know why it did that. And speaking of what's actually going on, like I'll be upfront with you. And this is a limit on my ability to do an analysis of the story. I still don't have a clue what's going on. But like overall, like in terms of the Templars versus Assassin stuff, I've got no clue. The game is deliberately being obscure, And I'm sure/hope that will become clearer and hopefully resolve in an interesting way over the course of the many other future games. But I'll let you know when I get there. And I'm going to try desperately to avoid getting spoiled in the meantime, which does feel like could happen.
I mean,
Good
it
luck.
never really is terribly coherent at any real point. I'll tell you that.
That doesn't surprise me. It doesn't, that doesn't surprise
Shocking.
me. Yeah.
Such a mainstream game.
Oh, yeah. Let me touch on the secondary content as well that Ubisoft are known for. Because to be honest, I only do small amounts of that. So like Sofie was saying in her section, like I'm really not a completionist with this at all. But there are some like pretty reasonable secondary content, and then also the kind of the stuff which feels to me a bit like padding, like I don't know, gathering all the feathers or whatever. I don't care about that. Why would I do that? But there are some like full blown missions. There's the Leonardo missions that you can unlock new technology. There's memory missions where we play through a whole story of Ezio's great love set in a time before Assassin's Creed 2. And the Romulus trials, which are relatively difficult dungeon sections. And there are also these extra full sync objectives for each of the main missions, which is a little bonus condition that you can choose to do for each of the main missions. So like for one mission, it might be do it, but don't get detected. Or another one, it might be do it without killing anyone, or it might be do it, but only use this specific weapon. And I took a very relaxed attitude to those. I tried them, and if I failed them, then I would just continue playing normally, which is what I would highly recommend. Because if you are committed to like passing them with all the full sync objectives done, and you like fail the objective right at the end, you have to, of a mission, which can be like 20 minutes long for a mission potentially, you have to restart the whole mission. Like it doesn't even go back to the last checkpoint. You have to restart the whole thing, which sounds to me incredibly boring. But and I've heard a lot of Assassin's Creed completionists get quite worked up about that aspect of it. But not being a completionist, that sounds like a you problem as far as I'm concerned. Just don't do it if it's that boring. But I would be interested in hearing Alex's take as a bit of a completionist in this type of game. Did you do this part of it?
No, I absolutely not. I never did the full sync objectives. I'm not really that much of a completionist. I like to play all the main shit. I have no interest in collecting all the little thingies and stuff like that. Knickknacks and I don't think you get anything in the game for doing the full sync objectives, do you? I can't remember. It's been a long time.
Would you do it if you did?
I mean, if it was a game where you got something, depends what it is, I guess. If it's like money in the game where you get a lot of money literally passively, I'd be like, nah.
So I didn't write down exactly what you get, but I know that you have to unlock like the computer simulation-y bits, like levels that are like trial levels set within the Animus rather than within Rome from doing some of the sync objectives. And then if you do those, I did want to bring this up actually, because we obviously have covered Kojima today. I think it's quite important to mention that there are actually multiple Metal Gear Solid references in this game. That there's a character hiding in the famous cardboard box, like literally exactly the cardboard box. And the most blatant one, which is connected to what we're saying here, is if you complete all these little Animus things, you can unlock as a playable outfit the Metal Gear Solid 4 Raiden suit.
Yeah.
So
it was
so kind of an interesting.
That was a crossover because in Metal Gear Solid 4 you could get a skin for Snake that was like Assassin's Creed outfit,
for Altair or whoever. Yeah. So I thought that was kind of interesting. I mean, I obviously didn't discover for myself the Metal Gear Solid 4 Raiden suit, but I did see the cardboard box that features fairly prominently in the story. And I'm like, hold on a second, what's that doing here? But yeah, and I guess there are a couple more things I want to mention before wrapping up. I've touched on already the Desmond stuff. I'm not really going to talk about it very much because, if at any given point you can leave the Animus and go and be Desmond for a bit, for some reason, I always felt like I wanted to be Ezio, the 16th century assassin running around Rome, killing people and doing all that stuff, rather than being Desmond and checking his emails, which is what the game encouraged me to do the one time that I did try and be Desmond. So, yeah, I never really did that. Maybe it got more interesting. My apologies if it did to the fans of this game. But I said 16th century, but I think I've just discovered it was 15th because I think it was mainly set in 1499. So they really tricked me up with that one. Anyway, I should also add that on release, there was a multiplayer part of the game, which sounded quite fun, but that is no longer available. And also, I've heard I've read from various forums, but I haven't seen anything like official saying this, that Ubisoft removed access to all the DLC for this game and also for the game Assassin's Creed 4, but not the other Assassin's Creed games. So even if you paid for it already, you can't access it
so weird.
anymore. And that seems very weird and a bit questionable. And I don't.
That's
I
kind of
suspect
I mean,
that's some sort of legal
it
thing,
kind
but
of
that's still bullshit.
I would assume, I'm interested in that, but I didn't really find any more information about it. I guess it speaks to the whole weirdness around digital ownership these days, which, is maybe something we'll talk about more in the future. But yeah, I mean, the long and short of it is I did like this game. It was fun. It was pretty easy breezy. 15 hours, as they say, I think is about perfect for me for this for this kind of game. I got to enjoy all the fun aspects of the gameplay, and the sort of weaknesses that there were didn't really become frustrating within a 15-hour period. And I should say as well that this game is pretty beloved by fans these days. It's often talked about as being maybe the best Assassin's Creed game, or up there with Assassin's Creed 4, or there are maybe 3 or 4 of them that are sort of debated as being like the best ones. And I'd also say this was received very well critically at the time. It's got an 89 on Metacritic, which is the second highest in the whole series, behind only Assassin's Creed 2. And I can see why. Right, the combat is easy, but it's fun. At least when you're doing the main thing you're doing with the Brotherhood mechanics and the execution stuff. The parkour has never been better. The city's fun to explore and rich with side content if you're into that kind of stuff. The story is fine enough on paper, but not the most compelling execution. Politically, it engages in a dab of capitalist realism, but it's really not that deep. And all in all, to answer the question that I started with, it feels like it's a slightly miraculous game that it would turn out this well, given the speed and tumultuousness of the development. So yeah, I mean, if you like Assassin's Creed, presumably you've already played it, but it's definitely a strong entry. And if you haven't played it,
just want to chime in with my vague recollections of this game, which are: 1, I did like it, but I didn't like it as much as 2. Basically, because I thought Rome was pretty boring as a location, and it's just Rome. Rome is really big in this, but it's just Rome, and literally, it's part of the story that historically at this time Rome was kind of a shithole, and almost all the big tourist attractions weren't built yet, and all the Roman stuff was already ruined. So it was just whereas the previous game is beautiful Venice and Florence and all this other stuff. So I was a bit disappointed with that. But second thing I really loved about this game was that, as you mentioned, you can recruit all these your team of assassins, and eventually you gain the ability to basically just you're just walking along and you see an enemy and you can target him, and Ezio puts his fist up and does an eagle sound or something, and an assassin just comes out falls out of nowhere and assassinates them when you just point at them. And that's just the coolest thing that I've ever done in a video game. And just the implication that there is at every moment a team of assassins silently and invisibly tracking me, just ready to pounce on anyone I point at any time, is so cool. And I wish any other game would ever do that, but they don't. Isn't that great?
It is a lot of fun. I wish that I mean, I've not played the later games, but I don't believe that this mechanic survives this game.
It's too much. It's too powerful.
That's a real shame. I feel like they should bring it back, or maybe bring it back later in a game or something, so it doesn't completely break the experience. But I'd like to see it developed a little bit. To be
maybe
honest.
It was in Revelations. I can't remember, but it definitely hasn't been in any of the more.
Well, I'll probably play that relatively soon, and I'll let you know.
But yeah, that's my Assassin's Creed Broho opinions. All right. Well,
cool.
That means I think we're done. I think it's the end of the episode. That's it, episode 31. It's done. Who knows what episode will be next? Rumors say 32, but I cannot confirm until we get there.
Might be 78.
It could be anything. It could be
knows?
anything. It could be anything. But for right now, as always, we really would like it if you told people about our podcast and spread it online and all of that. And
please.
The idea that you might not do that, I mean, it genuinely emotionally hurts me. And you're personally letting me and my co-host, but I can only really speak for myself, but it's devastating to me, the idea that you wouldn't do that. I mean, I know you're better than that. I know you're better than that. And I know you would. Yeah, I know you would never do that to me.
You know better.
You never do that to me.
You know better, listener.
I know you'll do this for me.
We're not angry. We're just disappointed.
Please. Anyway, you can do that on Twitter at Red Barrels Pod. and on Blue Sky at Red Bells Podcast, .bsky.social. Personally, you can contact me at AlexDean, ALEXDUIN, on Twitter. And sorry, Sofie very distractingly tried to swallow a sneeze. Didn't do it 100% though.
Sorry.
You know, we all live in this life. We all have to put up with that. But, you know, it was just distracting.
Sorry.
It's distracting, but that's on me. That's on me. I've been an unprofessional podcaster by even mentioning it, so I apologize.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, you can find me at AlexDean, ALEXDUIN, .bsky.social on Blue Sky. Sofie, how can they find you and your sneezes?
Well, if you still want to at this point, I wouldn't. You can find me at twitch.tv/Sofie Lee. What about you, Ed?
You can find me on Blue Sky at Not a Lemon and on X at Still Not a Lemon. That's STILL, not steel as in the metal.
Well done. Well done. Well done. But we really are done for now. So I am going to say goodbye.
Bye.